Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for March 19th, 2018.
Yes, and I would like to make an announcement. I am delighted today to announce that we have a new commissioner, Commissioner Salvatore Schibetta. Commissioner Schibetta is a Staten Island resident and a litigation attorney with extensive experience as well in community affairs. He is a very quick study, as I've learned, and I'm sure will become well-versed in short order with the arcane world of the BSA and the various laws, regulations, rules, and ordinances on which the BSA must focus every day. So please welcome, and I welcome, Commissioner Schibetta. We're so excited. We now have 5 commissioners, which we're supposed to have.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Okay, so we can
Okay.
begin.
Okay, we'll begin with a special order calendar, continued hearing items. Item number 1, 86649BZ, 200-01, 47th Avenue, Queens.
Okay, they asked for, we adjourned this because they didn't submit materials.
Item number 2, 7-57BZ, 2317 Ralph Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, so at the last executive session, we stated that the applicant had to attend the hearing in spite of requesting an adjournment to provide plans, and in spite of their requesting adjournment. And I asked that they provide plans and discuss what changes were being proposed to enlarge the convenience store that they referred to in their letter of requesting adjournment. And the applicant did not attend that, so that was a no-show on an unaccepted request for adjournment. So we rescheduled the hearing for this week and have received no submissions.
But he said he would be here.
They said they would be here, okay.
Okay, I'll remind him again, but they said they would be here.
Okay, so.
Yes.
And you reached out to them for this hearing? They said
But they
would
said told him
come.
to be here for this hearing, yeah.
Okay.
Item number 3, 63484BZ, 2501, 2509 Avenue K, Brooklyn.
This was also administratively adjourned because nothing was submitted.
Item number 4, 6594BZ, 14402 Jewel Avenue, Queens.
Plans were finally revised to show only 2 signs, the pylon on the corner and the sign next to the door on the Main Street entrance, to show an ADA toilet room on the plans, and that use group 4 is located at the cellar and first floors, and use group 6 is only permitted on the second floor. This is a note to our council. The resolution needs to be clear, since we can't seem to actually get the architect to put it on the drawings, that this is a use group 4B ambulatory medical care facility. There's actually ambulatory diagnostic and treatment is the technical term, and a use group 6B professional offices. It's not just use group 6 because it's not open to commercial uses, right? So no matter how hard we tried, we could not get that on the drawings. We also need to be clear in the resolution that all medical samples awaiting pickup must be kept within the property line. A photo shows that they put them gathered on that side porch, which is within the property line. And just noting, because they provided photographs, that since we started with this, the MTA installed a express bus station with those MetroCard dispensers there, so it creates more sort of furniture on the sidewalk around there. The applicant represents that it will be putting planting in those planting beds. They have sort of little boxes. But I don't think we need to wait for that, since it's actually not their property, it's city property, and I don't know with that bus stop whether the DOT will still be okay with it. And so I think the site, they painted the building. I think the site looks much better than when we started, and is now in compliance with the terms of the prior grant. Everybody else?
Yes.
Okay?
Item number 5, 21796BZ, 16501 Northern Boulevard.
Okay. We did receive, we hadn't received up until now anything from the community board. We received a conditional approval. Their condition asked that the owner add a motion sensor lighting on the building exterior to stay lit from sunset to midnight. Sort of understand that because with this big parking lot, it's very dark, so maybe that's why they want that. And not that the owner not utilize residential streets for any overflow parking, which is very reasonable. It should be, it's a large parking lot. They could, with valet, which they obviously use, fit a lot of cars on that lot. I think the applicant was responsive to our comments, except I'd like them to discuss more about the preventing of the parking on the sidewalk, because the owner's letter says, well, I'll do everything possible. Like what? So that really needs an operational plan. So if we could just get that, we would incorporate the operational plan into the resolution. And then we'll know, then neighbors would know if the plan isn't being enacted, if there's nobody around who's watching and chasing people off. Okay, so.
I thought we had also suggested to ensure that there won't be parking on the sidewalk, to provide some kind of street furniture.
Oh, that was another applicant.
Okay.
That was one where actually they're coming to us next week, right? The one where the owner of, the operator of the facility is coming to us? No, sorry, that was the car, the fancy car repair.
Well, this one has an empty street pit, so
Right.
on the.
And they submitted an
Yeah,
application
submitted
to
an
Parks
application.
Right.
to get
So
that
that would
filled.
also further prevent any parking on the sidewalk. And I don't know if there's a possibility to provide another one to the north side of the entryway. That would also further ensure that any maneuvering on the sidewalk would be limited only to that entrance and exit.
Right, so they're replacing the dead tree, which
Right.
was maybe one source of running over.
Right.
And they already, and DOT acknowledged that we've received your request and so on. But in terms of street furniture, we talked in another case about where they, about putting benches.
At the last review session, you suggested bollards.
Oh, bollards, but bollards can't be on city property, that can only be on their property.
On their property.
Right, so.
But there was a suggestion that we talk to DOT.
DOT, right, that I have a note to talk to DOT. And we need to kind of develop something with DOT about these sites. There are many sites where we're having problems with parking on the sidewalk, and maybe there's a way to create some relationship with DOT where these get highlighted for getting benches, bicycle racks, bollards, if DOT ever does bollards. But I don't think we can require it of them because this is really DOT's domain, right? Maybe it's something the community board has been involved in all of these cases, especially in this area, and perhaps the community board and DOT could be working together on the street furniture subject. Okay.
Item number 6, 18708BZ, 1247 38th Street, Brooklyn.
Sorry, still scrolling. Okay. They provided a cover letter that states that the applicant has not yet received a sign-off from DOB on the off-site parking, which they needed to do because the parking off-site doesn't strictly conform to zoning resolutions, so DOB has to figure out how they're going to handle that. They did show us how they were going to improve access by students to the elevators, ADA access. They also provided, and I wasn't really sure why, enlarged partial plans that are described as alternatives for egress. I didn't really understand why they're shown as alternatives. I didn't understand what the partial plans were for, other than a blow-up of what there is already on the main plans. There's also a short paragraph on building security in the cover letter that states that key cards will be used by all students and staff to open doors, and that's all doors. That would be like the fire stair doors. so that banquet hall guests can't penetrate to the upper floors. I actually don't understand how that could possibly work. So this has to apply to fire stairs, and so I wonder, will the key cards at all doors, will there be key cards at all doors to leave the fire stairs? None of this is allowed, right? You can't lock a fire stair door, right? So you can't have a key card for someone to get out of the fire stair on a floor, right? I don't believe, certainly not in the school. This is something the fire department really needs to look at, because the issue is there are adult strangers in the building at the same time as there are students in the school. And so the adult strangers go into the banquet area, enter it through the fire stairs, and then can wander around in the building. So the correct way of doing this is to actually have dedicated fire stairs that go directly to the outside for the banquet, and instead they're blending banquet hall and school together in terms of fire egress, which if the school were vacant during that time, but it's not going to be. There are after-school programs. They start these banquets like at 5 o'clock. And that's when the guests arrive. There's still staff. There's all of that. So I don't think that has worked out. And fire department really needs to be looking at this, because you can't have locks on fire stair doors. And then we had asked that the section show an outline of the required heights and setbacks under zoning, and we didn't get that. And that photo show the steel at the fifth floor setback that having been entirely removed, we didn't get that. And we had a lot of comments about the parking maneuverability at our last hearing, which I didn't see addressed in the submission. We had asked for fencing between the curb cuts to prevent sidewalk parking and to show how the center curb cut would be used. We didn't get that. We were also concerned about how valet drop-off and pickup would operate. And we expressed concern about the off-site facility that has a ramp, which maybe prevents maneuverability. So we didn't get anything on that. The plans for the off-site spaces show new curb cuts to be filed. That doesn't really make sense. Why would they need new curb cuts? They're already parking facilities. And then I just wanted to make a note to council when putting together the set, or staff when putting together the set, that the parking diagrams that are the off-site parking and the on-site parking have to be included in the main set, okay? And that's my comments. Anybody else?
I had a little confusion as to if they're at the same time, the students and the adults. There were buses, pictures of buses in the parking area. Is there going to be a separate valet parking for the banquet hall?
So the idea is that during the day, the buses park in front of the school in that parking lot at the school, and there are, I forget how many, 4 or 5 buses, and then those buses move off-site to one of those off-site locations, and then which according to the layout has room for a certain number of cars in addition to the buses, and then now it's clear to buses, and now 30-something cars can park in the area right in front of the school.
Okay.
That's what they've explained to us.
I think pretty much the 4 exits, especially on the ground level, except for the 2 in the rear, the others can be isolated. So it's just resolving that.
The 2 in the rear, right. Well, that's the thing is,
On 37th, I mean, not, 38th
Right.
can work. It's
Right.
the 37th, and I think there's an easy solution to it. There's a staircase, and there are 2 separate runs of staircases. And I don't know from a fire point of view if there's a way to provide a separate fire exit door for the residential from the banquet, which just then completely.
well, it has to go out through that lobby and
Right.
out.
So if there's a
right?
way to just provide that door, and that addresses, this prohibits that access point, but it allows the students to continue to the lower floor and then leave.
I think in the end, but nobody can see us pointing on a screen,
sorry.
but I think
Right.
in
That's
the
true.
end, the a staircase directly from down, straight outside, where it doesn't have any option to
Would be
come
the
into the
easiest.
lobby, would be the easiest, and there's room for it. There's already a staircase shown, actually, on both of those lobbies that could be used as the dedicated stair that goes down and is an official fire stair with a door and all that sort of stuff, and that should go straight out. There's also on the 38th Street side, that's the one on the bottom, right? That is already configured to go straight out.
Right.
And so that would need to be some kind of a restricted fire stair.
Right.
And again, you know, you always have to do this measurement about how many occupants there are and the size of the stairs. So I actually don't know whether limiting it to 4 stairs, is that 4 stairs of a certain width is enough. So, because they're having a lot, there's like, I forget what the number is, 700 people in this banquet hall. So there's a number of units that are required for egress. But that's really for them to work out. Okay.
Next one? Mm-hmm. Item number 7, 299-12BZ, 40-56 10th Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay, so this one is really requesting that we reconsider our conditions, and the reason for it is because they didn't comply with the conditions. So I kind of don't even understand that as a request. So here's the thing. If I understand this correctly, this was considered a type 1 action because the buildings that were being demolished were within a National Register designated historic district, right? So that makes it a type 1 action, and in order to not trigger a positive declaration, therefore an EAS, they include in the project the preparation of these HABs studies, which is really taking measurements of the building, and it becomes a record in the archive for the National Register, right? So as it turned out, they either didn't do it at all, or they did it really late, and the Landmarks Commission is sort of the designated or the delegated party that reviews the HABs on behalf of the State Historic Preservation Office. And these documents were either not submitted or were not or LPC was given no time to review them. And in addition to which, LPC was supposed to be looking at the project, and I guess that's looking at it in terms of archaeological impacts and things like that. None of that was done, and now the applicant is saying, please don't make us have that be a condition to permit, even though it wasn't done prior to permit. Let it be a condition to C of O. Well, that's effectively not doing it, right? So my feeling about it is that I don't understand. It was a condition under seeker, and there should have been therefore a positive declaration issued, which wasn't. So I don't actually even know how we could technically do it, but I don't agree that we should do it.
I was going to say, but if I recall, the resolution for this instituted that LPC condition at LPC's request. And
Okay.
so this has gone back to LPC. LPC knows kind of the status and order of events
Right.
that did or did not happen. And from what I understand, LPC has now given the okay.
Right.
That they're okay with that condition being
Oh.
changed.
Yeah.
Oh, where do we find out this? I didn't know
The
this.
letter
It was-
came in.
Letter. There was an
Last
email
week.
from Tracy identifying this letter and saying that
Ah,
LPC is now
okay.
signed off.
I didn't know this.
And so, since this was because LPC said they wanted this, not
Okay.
because VSA said they wanted it, and now LPC saying, we're okay with changing this, I think it should be okay for us
Okay.
to change it.
Okay, so has signed off on this. Okay. In addition, though, the applicant requests that we review certain modifications to the approved plans. Those changes are bubbled on one set of plans, but in order to be able to compare what was changed to what was last approved, we need a clean set of what I think the last approved that they're comparing it to is the letter of substantial compliance drawings. The one that was submitted to us isn't really legible, so you can't read the elevations. And it would be a lot easier if they would just circle those so that we could see, oh, okay, changed on here, changed here, instead of having to hunt around for where the change was. I couldn't read most of the numbers, but for example, on EZ10, the new one, the letter of substantial compliance roof height is 16 foot 2, and the new roof height is 17 foot 6. So there's changes where, unless I can't read the numbers, which is possible, there are changes where the building is getting taller, so that potentially, I mean, it's only a foot, but there may be other places where it's more than a foot, where it might be something we can't, is material. And so really, they need to clean up their submissions so we can tell better what the change is versus what was approved previously. It would be even easier if the proposed bubble set says exactly what was and what is proposed. That way, it's a very clear comparison, because I didn't find that that chart that was in the cover letter was helpful, because I couldn't find where they were referring to on each. I also didn't find, even though I think they submitted it to us, they showed it to us at the last hearing, I didn't find the DEC closeout letter.
They did.
They submitted it?
Submitted it, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I didn't find it in my, it was sent to submit.
Yeah, it was part. On March 15th.
Oh, so it was submitted really late. Okay.
It was they submitted the OER notice to proceed.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Good. New cases, item number 8, 55137BZ, 23302 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, we have, this is a new, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval on condition, and the conditions weren't really clear, but their concerns were clear, about an open spill on the site, poor maintenance with debris and debris strewn site, and cars parked on the sidewalks. Their review combined this application with the one that's calendared immediately after this one, which is next door and in common ownership. Counsel on the applicant here argues that the common ownership has not expanded the zoning lot, which in this case would not be permitted because it's a pre-61 variance. More on that in a minute, because it seems like there's a lot of activities here where it's being treated as if it's one site. The Community Board recommendation makes reference to month-to-month leases that will expire or terminate in 2018. And so I'd like to know what the status of the businesses are, because this application was submitted a long time ago. They received a dismissal warning letter and then is now before us. The cover letter also says that the spill was closed in 2017, but if you actually look at the DEC letter, it says a spill can be closed for different reasons, one of which is they have 2 spills open on the site. So it's just redundant. So we don't know if it was closed because remediation work was done. So we need information on the result of the testing wells, and DEC to confirm that no further work is required, since this site is adjacent to a park. And the environmental testing lab that prepared its report in 2015, based on on-site investigations and borings, concluded that remediation must be done. They actually had a whole list of remediation, so it's not at all clear to me that any of that was done. There are underground storage tanks that need to be removed, et cetera. I'm also really confused by some of the description in the statement of facts. If this site received an extension of term in 2013, which expires in 2022, why is it requesting a waiver of the rules pertaining to an expired variance?
Okay.
So I didn't understand that, and, maybe because these two applications are very similar, there was some boilerplate that just got left in, but that's what they're asking for.
This was an amendment.
And I do understand that they need an extension of time to obtain a C of O, that's different.
Right.
But the variance didn't expire, and because the C of O had a restriction that it be obtained by 2013, November 2013, and it wasn't, and clearly the site is out of compliance with the conditions of that grant.
Isn't the second case the one with the expired?
Yeah,
And
yeah, it
the
might
first
be.
one is just seeking the amendment from the auto repair to auto sales, but
Yeah.
they're not extending their term. 'Cause
Right.
They've
No,
got
yeah, that's a-
a pre-existing
Right.
term that keeps going.
I think that's correct, but the statement of facts about this case says it's requesting a waiver of the rules on an expired variance. And they made reference to the expiration date prior to its renewal in 2013. So, so it seems like somebody wasn't paying attention to all the paperwork. Somebody as in the applicant, okay. And then the certificate of compliance, which is signed by the applicant's representative, who I might add is an attorney, that other than the C of O, all conditions have been complied with. Meanwhile, neighbors were complaining about debris, and debris was one of the conditions, debris removal was one of the conditions of the grant. So I don't understand that. I looked at a Google satellite image that claims it's 2018, but I think there were leaves on the trees, so it must have been 2017. It shows cars parked on the sidewalk and access through the gates on the subject site that lead directly to the adjacent site. I mean, those things are connected. With respect to the claim that the uses are unrelated and fenced off, there's no fencing between those two sites, and it's actually not proposed to have fencing between those two sites. If you look, the fencing diagram shows fencing kind of in red, and it clearly is leaving out the property line between those two sites. With respect to the curb cuts, the approved plans show two 25-foot wide curb cuts 8 feet apart. The proposed, which is obviously the existing, shows 3 existing curb cuts, 15 feet, 34 feet, and 35 feet wide, which takes up basically the entire frontage, which was not what was approved. The proposal is to squash 30 cars on this site and to not provide a fence that separates this use from the adjacent property. And I think that the proposed use is really asking too much of this little site, and essentially legalizing the mess that we see on the site today. Photos show fences in various states of disrepair, the area overgrown and abandoned, and there's trash everywhere. So I wouldn't want to personally entertain a change in use to sales until the site is brought into a respectable state of repair, and then we can talk about the next, because it's not in compliance with the last grant. So, others?
I have questions with regards to the use, and some of the questions also tie in with how this use relates to the use next to it. First of all, starting with the curb cut, as you mentioned, there are 3 curb cuts. The easternmost curb cut, if you look at the plan, it straddles both of these lots. And so my question is it a shared curb cut? Is it a shared curb cut that is going to be used by both business operation, which is very critical for us to know, and that would answer the question of why there isn't a fence between the 2 properties. Will the operator of the subject side be different from the case that we're going to hear next, which is 233-20? Is there any codependency of services between these 2 sites? Because one will have a separate kind of auto repair, and the other one will be a much more lighter version of it. The hours of operation that is being talked about, in this particular, I want them to clarify why this facility has to remain open on Sunday, and what is the reason for it not to have a corresponding similar operation, hours of operation that we have seen pretty much along that entire Northern Boulevard. There was another case we had approved, and I don't think they're open for these kind of repair work on Sunday. I need to understand the operation for me to kind of consider a Sunday program. With regards to the parking space, the way the statement was written, it was very confusing trying to figure out where these cars are going and where the customers are going to park, and plans are not, I did various ways of accounting it. I couldn't figure out how the plans corresponded with the statement. And the biggest concern I have is with the proposed maneuvering plan. The maneuvering plan shows that a car will back into the oncoming vehicle that is moving eastbound from Northern Borough. So a car just pulls in head-on to the side, and then when it has to leave, the only way it can leave is it backs into the eastbound traffic, and then it's going to keep moving. That's not an acceptable solution. The car has to be able to merge into the northbound traffic, to the Northern Boulevard traffic directly, because that is creating additional traffic conflicts. Thank you. And also it can all result in some vehicles backing into the sidewalk. And though it's not a very highly pedestrian traveled sidewalk, but it is a safety issue, and that's not what the intent of the sidewalk is for. So I definitely do not think this is a viable solution for any vehicles entering and exiting this facility.
Anybody else on this one?
Well, my comments have to do with this one, but also the next door neighbor. When you do field visit, it really looks as if the entire operation of both of those lots are kind of one spilling right into another, and also spilling into the East Hills Chevrolet operation that's just further east. And they do make mention of it in one of these cases, the East Hills Chevrolet, the case that's about to come up next. And my question is, are they taking on some of the extra stock that's from East Hills Chevrolet? So if they have a connection going forward with them, they really should discuss it and talk about the operation.
Well, and a lot of this, for the next one where it's a 7221, so a post-61 variance, a lot of this, expansion of a zoning lot and so on isn't forbidden. It's something to discuss. That zoning lot was expanded at the last renewal, right? But in this case, it's a pre-61 variance. It's not allowed to enlarge the zoning lot. So, they're really coming up against the original grant, and maybe this actually because sort of living this lie isn't doing anybody any good, because they're going to put up a fence and take down the fence, right? They're going to claim that the gates are locked, but they're never locked, et cetera. So kind of my feeling about it is, if it's possible to do it, I don't know, because I think it's an amendment. I don't know if it's considered an amendment or a new variance to consider combining these two uses into one, and whether it would meet the finding. It would be a new variance, so would it make the findings, like all of that? But basically, it would be a cleaner approach. It would be a cleaner approach, assuming that they can make the findings, right? Because right now, where counsel is, for the applicant, is kind of basically giving us this fictional situation where, way back in 1977, the buildings department said that unless there is an actual act that indicates that that common owners are treating two sites as one zoning lot, it isn't one zoning lot. Well, there you go. Actual act. Maybe they haven't filed, buildings department usually looks at that as in terms of, did they file for one C of O for the two lots or something like that. But in this case, you don't need a building permit to not put up a fence, right? So, and things like that. So, okay, any others? No? Okay.
Item number 9, 33478BZ, 23320 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. There was a different, it's the same community board recommendation. They blended it together, so they were concerned about the maintenance of the site. The community board, there are on this site 11 open ECB violations and 1 open DOB violation, which need to be attended to. In the prior approval, the board permitted a portion of former Lot 33 to be used as patron parking, and it was shown separated from the use by a fence. The proposal appears to be eliminating the fence and adds a curb cut on Northern Boulevard that is described as existing, so yet again, another curb cut that wasn't permitted by the prior approval. A total of 44 cars are proposed to be parked on the lot, and this, for me, this is proof that you need that other lot in order to get there. There are 12 cars located at the rear of the property, separated from the main lot by a fence. It's not physically possible to get those cars in there unless you use a helicopter. So the only way is through the other lot. So are they interdependent? Absolutely, right? And I actually think this is too many cars on one lot. Again, they're really stuffing the cars into every square inch. And then with respect to the signage calculations and elevations don't seem to be taking into account all the signs that are all over the lot. And they're only measuring the height of the letters. You actually have to measure all the boundaries, the extreme boundaries of the sign. So I suspect that there are far too many signs on this lot for what's approvable in a C1. And so they have to do a careful analysis of the signs. Anybody?
Yeah, I had similar comments on the signage, I think, and in addition to that, the sign that's on the pylon is illuminated. It's not clear whether it's illuminated or non-illuminated because it's not consistent with the drawing sheet information. Again, the plan shows that there are 29 spaces for showroom, whereas the statement of fact refers to a different number. And similar question, how will the spaces in the rear be accessed through this site? The plan does not show a storage, trash storage area. It's stated in the statement of fact, but not reflected in the plan. Again, I have comment on this one. The statement of fact refers to a Z101 drawing, traffic circulation, which has not been submitted. And I would like to see that plan. And this has to be independent of the other side. If they are operating separately, then the traffic plan for this one has to stand on its own merit. And I think those were and again, the parking spaces was unclear as to how it's going to be used by customer versus which is going to be really the parking space for the showroom. Those were not very clearly delineated.
Why do that's the thing for using it for a showroom, why do they need so much parking on the site if it's a showroom?
Well, I'm assuming most of the parking spaces, especially along 234th Street, are all the showroom parking spaces.
All of those other ones crowded up.
Those are for the repairs. So any one of those used cars that are for sale would undergo repair before they are moved to the showroom site. That's kind of what I'm gathering, but that's not been made clear. And that's the other reason why we want a clear separation of, clear understanding of how this space and the maintenance that is happening on this side, is that just for the showroom vehicles, and this is for all vehicles. I can even bring my car in there and get it fixed. And it's not just for all the showrooms along Northern Boulevard. So that understanding has to be there.
Anybody else?
My previous comment for the other case stands for this as
Right.
well.
Which was, so let's just repeat
Talk
that
about the operation of this site, the site adjacent to the west, and also whether or not there's a relationship with East Hill Chevrolet.
Item number 10, 540-84BZ, 341 Soundview Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommended approval on condition with one abstention. Their condition said, please install signage of the company name, address, and contact number. Install signage required by New York State Department of Motor Vehicles and other signage required by city and state agencies regarding business practices. These things are required by law. It's funny that they don't have, they're operating anonymously somehow. And please do not have vehicles double parked, parked on sidewalk without proper license plates, and please allow all traffic parking, follow all traffic and parking laws. So obviously, Community Board has observed a lot of illegal behavior with respect to where the cars go. They said that there's an auto body spray booth in one of the uses. They need to provide DEP permits and an inspection report because spray booths are heavily regulated. They submitted, and I don't know why, a sanitation salvage cut sheet. Was that to show us that they hired sanitation people to clean up the site? Because there is a before photo taken in the summertime of the place just covered in trash. And then there's a photo taken in the winter where it looks like the trash is cleared up, even though you can't really tell because there's snow. So I'm not sure why they showed us that cut sheet. They need to show the signage on the elevations. The 2017 Google satellite view shows cars parked on the sidewalk, and they need to come up with a solution for how to control this.
There was a pickup truck with a plow on the sidewalk when I went by. I was hoping that was just temporary for, the past nor'easters that we had, but it was right there on the side.
Okay. And, okay, so there's also these really generous landscaping plans, which I'm not sure represent actual conditions. So given now, since they took those photographs when there was snow, I think that was in January, and assuming we don't have snow by a couple of weeks from now, I think they can give us photos of the area now, and if needed, they can replace the vegetation that is missing. There was a generous landscaping plan because the site is adjacent to houses that are at the side and the rear. So it was actually really good because they have a big area between the building and the houses. It's very ideal buffer. Anybody else? No?
Move on. Item number 11, 175-95BZ, 20535 Linden Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval. I'd just like clarification on the floor area of the Use Group 9 banquet hall and the area of the existing Use Group 6 stores that will remain as Use Group 6 stores, because the statement of facts make it sound like the banquet hall took over the entire building, and then you look at the floor plans and there are still stores there, so that needs to be clarified. There are public assembly permits for both of the banquet facilities and a 2017 fire department certificate of operation. So I have to assume regular inspections take place by the fire department, but if not so, then if fire department could just check into that. I mean, it's from 2017, so I'm assuming. The parking spaces that are provided meet or exceed the parking category D for a banquet hall in a C13 zoning district, which is what this is. That's one space per 12 persons. So, anybody?
I just wanted a clarification. They are proposing to extend the hours of operation for the banquet hall to 8:30 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. It's a daily. I'm assuming it's for weekends, Saturday and Sunday, but it wasn't,
Yeah.
that's for
Okay.
7 days of the week, 8:30 to 1:30.
So it already was allowed to be 9 a.m. to 1:30 Monday through Sunday. And they showed that they have these church events that's why they need to be open that extra half an hour earlier.
But is that weekdays? Weekdays is from 9 AM, right?
No,
No, I
it-
thought it was just daily.
Daily.
It would be daily?
It used to be 9 AM to 1:30 AM.
right.
Every day. And now they just want to make it half an hour earlier on the morning.
No, the hours of operation that was granted was 12 noon to 3
No,
PM.
no, that
from
was
8 PM to
changed
1.
No,
subsequently.
it's now 9 AM to 1:30
Yeah.
AM daily, and they want 8:30 AM to 1.
Okay.
I think they have breakfasts, and they want to wrap up the breakfasts in time for
Okay.
people to go about their business and get to work and whatever they need to do. It's not just religious. I think the community, like council and community offices, they have breakfasts and brunches and lunches here. Like, this is a well-known
Right, yeah.
banquet hall for that neighborhood.
And the parking would be open then for that entire duration?
I would assume so.
Because the statement said there would be no change to the proposed parking hours, which is from 5 PM Friday to Sunday. So I just wanted a clarification.
Right. So in terms of the hours, I know I cut and pasted the conditions from the two different grants. So there was a December 10th, 2016 grant, right? And that only discussed that the parking will be from Friday until
Right.
close of business Sunday,
Right.
Friday at 5 PM.
Right.
So that they don't need to maintain all those spaces the rest of the time. And then the prior grant, which is 2007, that's the one where it showed the hours of operation, and it didn't show it 7 days a week as 9 AM to 1:30 AM. Instead, it showed it as 12 noon, as you were reading, 12 noon to 3 PM, 8 PM to 1:30, Monday through Friday, and 9 AM to 1:30, Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
What I'm, now that you bring it up, what I'm missing, which I thought I found, but I didn't keep it, is where they said that they would have those hours 7 days a week. So I think maybe you're right, that we're just talking Saturday
Yeah,
and
oh,
Sunday.
here it is.
Oh, you found,
Yeah, it's in the whereas. So if you look at the latest grant, in 2000,
16 it should be.
Thousand,
decision 2007.
Oh, no, sorry, 2006.
2007, I think it is.
Yeah.
2007.
It says, whereas the applicant proposes to increase the hours of operation, which are currently the Monday through Friday, 12 to 3, 8 to 1:30 a.m., and Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 1:30 a.m., whereas the proposed hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. daily. And whereas the board determined that these hours of operation are appropriate.
Okay, it didn't go into the conditions, that was,
Missed that in the whereas.
okay,
Okay, thanks.
thank you, okay.
Item number 12, 21607BZ, 255 East 74th Street, Manhattan.
All right, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommended approval. This is an extension of term of an existing PCE in a building that was under construction at the time of the grant. There is residential use adjacent to the PCE and directly above it. And this is an Equinox, and we know that Equinox in some other building, at least one, has had problems with their upstairs neighbors. So I think this is a situation where the neighbor should be notified. So this was not, there was no notice to neighbors required for this extension. So neighbors should be notified, posting something in the lobby, let them know, and we'll have another continuation on this. They did provide massage therapist licenses, and we do need proof that they installed and have sign-offs on sprinklers and fire alarms that are referred to in the statement of facts. Because again, the building wasn't built, so we need to know that these were installed and they're functioning and inspected, et cetera.
And could they tell us about the signage? Because the signage analysis form just says complies.
Yep.
Item number 13, 2815BZ, 88 Fulton Street, Manhattan.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application. There is no notice of hearing requirement for extension of time to obtain a C of O. Community Board recommended approval, but stated, CB1 does not oppose the applicant to the BSA for an amendment to the previous approval. However, the board has serious concerns about the state of disrepair of the building and the resulting long-term scaffolding that has been placed around the building. We implore the landlord to take immediate action to remedy the situation so the scaffolding can be removed. If the landlord is unable or unwilling to take this action, we call on DOB to intervene in order to expedite the repair of the building. And then I just note there's a sprinkler, a 12/15/17 sprinkler inspection report from a sprinkler contractor. Other than, I didn't have any issues about the continuation of the PCE use or allowing them more time to get a C of O, but the real issue is what happens when you have a building owner who has, who's managing a building really badly. There are residential tenants in this building, and essentially wins because there's a PCE that's paying rent, right? So I do think that the owner should be explaining to us, or explaining to DOB or something. Here we are in a process where there's been a request from the community board that somebody do something about this building. So maybe there's something that we can do with DOB, something for the owner to demonstrate to DOB that it's making progress on curing the violations or something. Because, I think that's why the community board makes these statements in these resolutions. Help us.
At the same time, I just caution that these special permits belong to the tenants.
They do.
They don't belong to the building owners.
It's true, but the building owner benefits.
Yeah.
See if we can get a copy of the lease.
Yeah, well, we don't normally look at the leases.
Yeah, 'cause that's
And the
a- that's a
leases,
contractual thing.
pay your rent, and I building owner will be a building owner.
But they have to assist and comply with the building order, getting whatever permits they need.
We can certainly forward this to DOB, the concern to DOB, and
Yeah.
ask.
I don't think we have any jurisdiction.
But we don't have,
No,
we
we don't
can't
have
force the
jurisdiction.
owner to do anything.
And the violations related to the PC, there are only 2 of them. So even if
Yeah.
those get addressed, and those would get addressed
Kind of the
once we...
extent of our.
You're right.
So, but the problem is that they can never get a C of O on this building because their violations are so extensive in the rest of the building which is why they're asking, can we please get just a TCO for our space? Because the rest of the building is in this state of wreckage. And the community board is upset about it too. So maybe this is something where we reach out to like legislative affairs or something at DOB, because it's a community issue. It's not just an inspector issue. Obviously, there are tons and tons of violations. A lot of those come about because community complains, right? And that doesn't get anywhere. So maybe what we're talking about is, upping it at DOB to a different kind of a level.
But shouldn't
Right.
that be pursued independently of this case?
Yes.
and
Yeah,
allow-
no,
Yes,
I'm not
that
saying-
Yeah.
Wouldn't be holding this case back.
Yeah, I'm not
anyway.
saying that it holds the case back. I'm saying, like, somehow the owner needs to be on notice that this has stepped up, that it will step up to a higher level, that more people are watching, and you can't just let the buildings fall apart. And in this case, it's around residential tenants. It's different with commercial tenants. A lot of it is self-help, but not with residential. Okay.
Move on.
Yeah, just one second. Okay.
Appeals calendar, continued hearing items. Item number 14, 2016-2A, 74 Buttonwood Road, Staten Island. We have an adjournment on this.
Right, so this is an appeal, interpretive appeal, but is the 4th adjournment, will be the 4th adjournment, this one. So I don't see that we need to keep this in play after the next hearing. They can't have any more adjournments. So again, the owner and the applicant need to be notified by certified letter that no further adjournments will be permitted or the case will be dismissed.
I thought the reason for this adjournment is because they are at the DOB.
Yeah, but so that's their business. Then if they're at DOB working it out, work it out. And we don't need to keep the case open, right? Either they're appealing or they're not appealing. If they're dealing with DOB, then go deal with DOB, right?
Yep.
I mean, they've been here since, it's been here for
Just-
over a year.
Also to flag the last hearing, they said they expected a resolution, the last hearing was in December, they expected a resolution in 8 weeks. And this is 3 months later and they're still not resolved.
Right.
So-
And we know that in this case, the solution was something as silly as like taking out a cooktop or something like that. So why are we having this conversation?
Cabana, cabana, cabana.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
This is the
This is
cabana.
the
They said,
cabana
take out the stove and it's not a second
Never mind,
building,
I'm not going to suggest it.
right?
Okay.
Okay.
Item number 15, 205.
So I just want to
I'm
make
sorry.
sure
I
that a letter
apologize.
goes out to the applicant and the owner,
And owner.
certified mail. That in the next case, it will, if you don't appear, it will be dismissed.
Okay. Item number 15, 205-15A through 214-15A. This is 12860 to 12876 Hook Creek Boulevard and 128-63 to 12875 Fortune Way, Queens.
Okay. The fire department has stated that it requires all buildings in the project to be sprinklered. The applicant is saying the code does not require that they do so. I would say that's between the applicant and the fire department because the BSA relies on the firefighters to tell us what safety is, and we're not going to make a determination on their part. Also, fire department needs to now look at the revised site plan that shows locations of hydrants and a wider turnaround. They did request a wider turnaround. I don't know if this one, the shape of it complies with what they expect. A builder's pavement plan was submitted, and we need to submit that to DOT and DEP for their review. I do understand that it's a different kind of a review when you're submitting it as part of your construction set, but at least we need them to check that it's generally meeting standards. The cover letter claims that the houses as placed on their tax and zoning lots comply with yard and distance requirements, but they didn't provide us with any zoning diagram to show compliance that shows here are the sections, this is what the yard requirements are, this is the distance from the various lot lines, from the different houses and all of that. They claim that they improve the distinction between the zoning lot lines and the tax lot lines, but I tell you, that is a very subtle distinction. In this case, this architect needs to learn about line weights. You use thicker line weights for zoning lots and thinner ones for tax lots, and then dash lines that represent something else are thinner still, and everything is the same line weight, so it's very hard to find anything, but in addition to which, without knowing what's what and what regulations apply, we can't tell whether this is a compliant project. And to drive this home, we had another GCL application several months ago where we questioned compliance with the zoning regulations and sent the applicant to DOB for a ZRD1, and DOB agreed that the project needed to be reconfigured. So we are looking at whether this project complies with the zoning. We're also still waiting for an HOA. So really, according to that, that was supposed to have been submitted before. This should have been administratively adjourned because the application wasn't complete. The materials weren't complete. So we really can't do anything without an HOA. Anybody else on this one?
Item number 16, 238-15A through 243-15A. This is Dunton Court, Queens.
Yeah, so nothing was submitted, so it's being administratively adjourned. I note, it's only been adjourned twice before a while ago.
He's trying to get something for us.
Yeah, but we've been in hearings on this for 2 years, almost 2 years. So, yeah.
Next three are together.
You're right.
Yeah.
Item number 17, 2016, 4333, 433, A, 16 and 19 Tuttle Street. Item number 18, 2017, 30A, 16 Tuttle Street Garage. Item number 19, 2017-2268, 18 Tuttle Street.
Okay. The ongoing story about what faces Home Place versus what faces Tuttle Street. So the through lot on Home Place, also facing Tuttle Street, the drawing was half-heartedly corrected to give a path to that house from Home Place, even though clearly you can see from the site plan that the house still faces Tuttle Street. So I didn't find that responsive to our direct questions of why 18 Tuttle, also known as Lot 92, can't simply comply with the through lot regulations for private roads, which allows one front yard of 30 feet to face either direction. You just pick which one is your 30-foot front yard. That way, the house could be pulled forward to a line or be closer towards Home Place with the other houses on Home Place. The front door then could switch to face Home Place, and the 30-foot front yard could be located on Tuttle with the bushes shielding it as it's required to have. The parking space could be approached from Home Place, from Tuttle, which is one of the requirements of a private road, that you're supposed to have 5 vehicles, I think, accessed from the private road. We asked that specifically that this be done, and our direction was ignored. The community board, the borough president agree with us here, and the fire department also wanted access from Home Place for obvious reasons. That's an open road. They don't have to go down this strange little road with this cul-de-sac and so on. And, basically the project that's proposed is simply bad urbanism. The projects, the sidewalks on Tuttle were finally connected all the way around, but I don't see now how the plan complies with the screening requirements of 26-35. The plans label the screening now as voluntary, but the adjacent zoning lots are still facing a private road, and that's what triggers 2635. We asked that compliance with side yard regulations for all of the lots be demonstrated, and I didn't see that on any of the plans. Same issue. They're very close to their side lot lines. That's why I asked that. Fire department, again, needs to review the revised site plan. It's very different from what was before. And then we received sort of a title report or something that indicates that Tuttle Street is owned by the Zion Lutheran Church. But without any conclusion about what that means for this project. So
I believe the church is supposed to be here tomorrow.
Say again?
I believe the church is coming tomorrow,
Okay. So
what I understood from the applicant.
But it's kind of strange. So they just hand us this thing and say, here, Zion Church owns it. That's nice. The property is owned by 1671 Highland Boulevard LLC, or maybe they're the contract vendee. So did they contract to buy from Zion Place, the Zion Church, this section of Zion Church's property? Like, why didn't they tie this together and explain to us why it's okay, right? And we don't actually know what it is that Zion Church owns. They just said they own Tuttle Street. Which part of Tuttle Street? The entirety of Tuttle Street. What's critical is Tuttle is a map street up until a point, and then it's
But there was a
nothing.
portion that was demapped.
Well, but
Yeah.
how do we know that? Because you think that that's what it says, but how do we know that's what
No,
it
no,
says?
I'm just saying.
Right? But, the applicants often do this. They just hand us stuff, and then we have to figure it out. So then there was an amendment to the HOA indicating more the maintenance of Tuttle Street. So our council needs to review that, and it seems like probably what they inserted is okay, but council needs to review. And then I would like the recording of those documents against the property as a condition to approval. In other words, prior to our vote. The builder's pavement plan shows the old configuration of Tuttle Street. So even though there's a pavement plan for Home Place, so they need to correct that. And then DOT and DEP need to review that from our side. I didn't see sidewalk widths indicated on Home Place in the builder's pavement plan. And there's this jog in the sidewalk between the existing and new sidewalk. I didn't understand why that's needed. And I didn't see street lighting on Home Place. There may be, I think I saw one street light on Tuttle. And then there's this confusing submission that, as part of what was submitted to us, that appears to be irrelevant to the subject GCL 35 and 36 application, and has something to do with an interpretive appeal that is not yet before the commissioners. We cannot consider this in this hearing, so it should be removed from the folder for the previously named calendar numbers and ignored by the commissioners. It's not before us, we can't talk about it, okay? And anybody else?
Good?
Yep.
Zoning calendar, decision items, item number 20, 2017-237BZ, 13437 35th Avenue, Queens.
The height and location of the FAA obstruction warning lights are clearly indicated on the plans. The DNL 65 contour information was provided where this site is outside that contour. And we did get the signed and sealed surveyor's datum comparison chart, so we're good to go after a very informative hearing. And I think on the next one, we got a copy of the PowerPoint so we can all study up on.
For future cases. also.
Yes. Okay.
Sure, the next one?
Uh-huh.
Item number 21, 2017, 238BZ, 13403 35th Avenue, Queens.
And similarly, on this one, the submissions were made to clarify the elevations to the top of the obstruction lighting, the DNL 65 compliance, and the comparative datum chart.
I just have one comment,
Uh-huh.
and I think it was written incorrectly in the statement of fact. It says the average mean sea level is 0.19 foot above NAVD 88. It actually is the reverse.
Reverse.
So
Yeah.
that just needs to be corrected.
Yeah, but we're, yeah.
I don't know if you want this to be corrected. I
Correct,
just-
this is the correction of it on the record.
Right, right.
Okay, so
I mean,
The
that's fine.
estimate
you know,
of
it's,
fact
wanted-
it's
yeah.
actually funny, when you have a technical report from someone, it's very tricky for a lawyer to then
Translate.
try to translate that into lay terms. My recommendation always is, there's a chart, signed and sealed by a surveyor, leave it alone. Refer to the chart for the information, because if you'll remember on another hearing, it stumped, that same question stumped this architect for weeks. And we couldn't get the surveyor to sign off on it, because the surveyor was like, whoa, I'm not sure I know the difference. So, you know, word to wise lawyers, don't try to translate super technical information.
Yeah, especially this elevation things, it's
Yeah.
usually confusing to lawyers, because when it says MSL is higher, the first impression is the numbers in MSL should be larger than but it's the opposite, because if you have a datum that is higher, it means that the difference between a specific elevation and that datum in numbers is less. So when it says higher, and then you go to the number and you see it's less, you get
Right.
confused.
Yes. Hence, let the experts do the expert talking. Okay. There's a great Laurie Anderson piece about experts. Okay.
Move on. Continued hearing items, item number 22, 11614BZ, 188 East 93rd Street, Manhattan. We received a request for an adjournment.
Yeah, this one is kind of unfortunate, because if you're in this kind of conflict between a tenant and an owner, you write stuff down. So instead, they had some sort of handshake agreement or verbal agreement, and the two parties left that conversation thinking completely unrelated things. They should have had a written agreement that says, when the tenant does a log of noise complaints, it's written down, and the owner of the studio does their similar log, and then they compare notes prior to hearing time to see what kind of adjustments can be made. And the tenant never ended up calling the studio to say that it was noisy. So they've asked for more time to work this out. It's fair.
Yeah, but I thought AKRF indicated that they like witnessed conversation between the tenant and the owner, and at the end.
Unless it's in writing, people understand what they understand. So if it's in writing and it says, when you hear the noise, call us. That's very clear. But the tenant may have understood that I'll do my log and I'll let BSA be the judge of the log. And so they're like, you know, the quasi-judicial deciders about this. So who knows what the tenant understood, right? And I'm not saying there isn't a difficulty between the tenant and the owners in this case. There's obviously tension. All the more reason why it should have been clear in writing. So that's surprising to me that they
And
didn't do
according
that.
to the applicant, the owner didn't receive this. The tenant, I think, handed it to someone at the gym, and the owner they received this after they
submitted
made their
everything.
submission, and then I had emailed, unfortunately, I had emailed Sandy the tenant's thing, but apparently it didn't get to
So
her,
there's a little
whatever.
bit of a lack of miscommunication.
Right, and so there was, you know, they
especially from
didn't
the
know,
tenant's
so when they
part
did
of
their
it.
affidavits, they
Right.
thought now they have to get the
it
AKRF to
puts
come
the
out, and this
applicant-
costs
Wait,
the
wait,
owner money. This
Yeah.
costs the owner money. I mean, you know, they
Right.
want more money to do all of these things, and so they're trying
It
to.
costs people money, but that's the lack of
Thousands of dollars for the
communication costs
AKRF.
people money, and writing things down, and then say, each one signs, I agree, and then the tenant can hang it on the back of his door and knows this is the deal, and when I have a complaint, I write down the time, and then I make a phone call to the studio. Then the studio can say, okay, what are we doing right now? And adjust or make a note also, because they're supposed to be keeping a log. And it seems sort of obvious that it should have been a written agreement. But anyhow.
Item number 23, 214-14A, 215-14BZ, 103rd Street, Queens, and 10310 Alistine Avenue, Queens. We have an adjournment request.
Right, but I want to say that this will be the third
Third adjournment,
adjournment.
yes.
So the applicant must appear at the next scheduled hearing, or same thing, where we'll send out a letter saying that the application is going to be dismissed.
Wait, should we send?
Oh,
the
actually,
letter
we should
now?
send out, we should send the letter out now, saying must appear at the next hearing, certified to the applicant and the owner.
So this is the last adjournment we'll
Yeah,
accept.
basically.
Got it.
And this has been going on, well, actually, almost a year. May of last.
Move on? Mm-hmm. Item number 24, 2016-4169BZ, 230 Borum Street, Brooklyn.
This is being administratively adjourned for failure to make a complete submission, which is our standard, actually.
Open seeker item.
Open seeker. Okay. Okay.
Item number 25, 2016-4274BZ, 1411 39th Street, Brooklyn. And item number 26, 2016-4339BZ, this is being adjourned, correct?
Right, correct.
Like June 5th?
Yeah, they requested the adjournment.
June 5th, yeah.
June 19th, right?
I think we put on June 5th, didn't we?
Oh, I don't know. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
June 5th, yeah, sorry. Item number 27, 2017-190BZ, 2311 31st Street Road, Queens. Why is this in red? Oh, I didn't take the thing off.
Okay. Sorry? No. So the applicant submitted a response to 32BJ's testimony that expresses concern about the misuse of the expansion of the Cornell Doctrine. I want to clarify that the emergency that this expansion is intended to address is housing that is affordable to low-income residents, such as these seniors and other special needs residents. We are not talking about projects where the rents remain unaffordable to most New Yorkers. According to the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development, known as ANHD, which is an umbrella organization of 100 not-for-profit affordable housing development groups that serve New York City, in 2015, extremely low to low-income earners, so those earning between what's considered today as 10% and 100% of AMI, made up 67% of New York City's population. It's a shocking number. 67% are low-income earners, with extremely low-income earners at the 10 to 30% of AMI range, making up 27% of that number, so almost a third of New Yorkers, and very low to low-income earners at what are considered the 40 to 80% of AMI, making up 30% of that number. And then low, what are known as low moderate income earners, so who they're not moderate, they're at the low end of moderate, who make up between 90 and 100% of AMI, are only 9% of the total of New Yorkers. So we're really seeing that 57%, so almost 60% of New Yorkers are low-income earners. These extremely low to low-income residents suffer the most from the housing crisis and are most often the subjects of NIMBYism in the same way that houses of worship and educational facilities are. These are the issues that the Cornell Doctrine is intended to address, and how the proposed expansion should be limited to projects being developed by experienced not-for-profit, low-income housing developers for restricted rent projects that are 100% targeted to earners who are extremely low, very low, and low income, and which will remain rent restricted to such earners for the life of the building. Today, the income levels representing average median income, which is a defined term today, are in alignment with HUD and HPD and the two agencies. HPD actually relies on today on HUD guidelines, but might rely in the future on another set of guidelines, and are referred, and that's what the ANHD data that I just cited uses in their data sheet. So by being clear that we're talking about extremely low, very low, and low-income New Yorkers, we can be clear that the doctrine's expansion is precisely targeted, and there will be no room for leakage or abuse. That's to respond to 32BJ's concerns, but also to be clear that this is not going to be, the expansion of the doctrine is absolutely not intended for market rate housing, for-profit developers, not at all. The whole idea is that the projects cannot be built unless there's additional floor area, usually, to compensate for the gaps in funding that occur when you have a building that doesn't have adequate floor area to provide additional units, because units are what make a project viable. Additional units are what make a project viable. The applicant also provided a much clearer explanation on the scope of the facilities to be provided in the accessory social and welfare facilities and the recreation space, both of which that are required by the zoning resolution. We received an HPD sign-off letter on the plan, which indicated their review of the plans and financial analyses. And I think the only thing we're waiting for still is the ZRD1 and CCD1 with respect to flood regulation compliance. But otherwise, in terms of seeker, there's an E designation that's been accepted, right? And all of the other environmental questions have been addressed, right? So it's just the ZRD1. Okay. Anybody else?
New cases, item number 1, 2017-54BZ, 1215, 1217 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. We have proof of service of initial application to officials, but there's no notice. I
emailed it to you.
You did? The proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors? Okay. Is it in the submit?
Yes.
Okay, because
She sent it to Submit, and me.
Okay.
It's in the folder.
I didn't see it either, but if you say you have it, if that, yeah, but have, okay. Community Board 14 recommended approval with 2 abstentions. I note the plans are not signed and sealed. They need to be. We need a firm map. This is a proposal to convert 2 semi-detached houses that now sit on 2 separate tax lots into a single one-family home. As a threshold matter, it appears that far too much of the existing material is being removed. 50% of the exterior walls and 50% of the existing floor joists must be maintained. We now have a sample demolition drawing that Darrell can share that should be used to establish retention of an adequate amount of material. So Jill, if you could get Darrell and then give that to the applicant. I just note that this typology of semi-detached building, which is quite an interesting typology because it's not the usual one that we see in these neighborhoods. It's got sort of this entry, sort of recessed entry condition, and then sort of this protruding enclosed, it's not a porch. Maybe it was built originally as a porch, but a protruding entry condition on the sides. So that typology has a small cluster on this block next door and across the street. And they have very deep front yards, and they share driveways to a rear garage. So in terms of neighborhood character in this typology. The house as proposed is taller than the neighbors. The roof is very high, but only a small portion is shown as being occupied. So the height could be brought down to be more consistent with the neighbors' heights. Because of the attic space, we need floor area diagrams. It's hard to understand what the floor area measurements are. With respect to the proposed FAR, there are a few other houses on the social block and tax block that are in that range, a total of 7. With respect to the rear yard incursion proposed at 24 foot 6 inches, there are immediate neighbors at the sides and rears with complying yards. There's one house to the upper rear, so because it's a double wide lot, so there's one house directly to the rear that has a 20-foot rear yard, but there's no information on how many stories it is. The proposed is a big house for the neighborhood, so some adjustments at the upper stories to be respectful of neighbors is reasonable and totally doable, especially at that attic level where it's not really being used for much. And I note that a portion of the building at both levels is set back further than 24 foot 6 from the rear yard, but it isn't dimensioned. So actually, the statement of facts misrepresents what the rear yard shape is. A portion of the rear yard is probably complying, is probably 30 feet. So, anybody else on that one?
I actually, in terms of the neighborhood context, it's mostly detached homes except for, as you mentioned, these 4 clusters of semi-detached, and most of them have this kind of a single building appearance. And what they're proposing to do kind of maintains that element of semi-detached in front appearance, which I think is an interesting solution. And in terms of the...
Aren't they filling in? I think that's part of the problem with
but just the elevation,
loss
the
of
way...
character.
I like the elevation.
Loss of...
Well, the character is...
No, I didn't mean, sorry, not loss of character. That they're taking down too much of the existing fabric. If they left the front intact, doll it up in a different way, I understand they want to make this into a chalet or something like that, right? But if they left those front walls in the same location, they'd probably meet their 50% requirement. But by filling that in, pulling it forward, they're tearing down too much of the existing fabric. So that's the issue there.
Again, I think for me, the existing fabric, the 4 buildings doesn't define the existing fabric of the neighborhood.
No, I'm sorry.
Right?
When I say, when I'm using fabric in 2 contexts, I'm saying existing material. So we have a threshold question about removing too much existing material. So, and the main reason is because they're tearing down the front. Because they're not keeping much of the sidewalls. So if they retain more of the front, they'd probably meet the 50% perimeter wall requirement. So that would then allow for that same kind of shape of the front that the neighbors have, in terms of that typology. I'm not saying that there aren't lots of single-family houses on the block. I'm just saying, from a design perspective, there's got to be something that gives in order to retain enough existing material.
Well,
So they can design it however they want to design it, right? But I'm suggesting that that's the simplest way to have enough material to be able to pass the threshold question.
I think this is something in prior board discussions on similar cases, we had talked about, how much of the permitted enlargement that would be permitted in the rear or in the side or in the front should be allowed, and then the above and beyond that. And this would be like in a situation, if they were to go ahead and build an as-of-right expansion, they would be allowed to build into that, that little notch in the front. And looking at some of the other buildings in that area, pretty much none of them have that notch. Even the two of the other remaining clusters of the semi-detached, they also don't have that notch. The notch has been filled. So again, I understand the 50% argument, but this is again one of those cases where do we count the 50%?
Well, they can pick whichever perimeter walls they want. That's their business. It's just their job to just demonstrate it. I was just suggesting that that's probably the easiest place to get it from, but that's their architect's choice. So, okay. Anybody else on this one?
Item number 2, 2017-187BZ, 3660 East Tremont Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board 10 recommended approval. We have one letter in support. There's a 1977 C of O for this use that does not indicate that there is a drive-through. So either this is an existing non-conforming condition, which I don't really see how, or it's illegal. When did McDonald's start? Post 61?
McDonald's, the business? I think
Yeah.
post World War II.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, was it?
40s,
Okay.
50s, yeah.
So it could be a non-conforming condition, potentially. But anyway, so either it's that or it's illegal. Meanwhile, the existing site plan, I don't know why I said meanwhile, but anyway, the existing site plan allows for 19 parking spaces, queuing for 9 cars, and kept the queuing cars about, and keeps the queuing cars about 25 feet away, and the menu board about 35 feet away from the adjoining residential property. So even if it was done without any kind of special approval, it was very respectful of the adjoining residential property owner as when it was designed. The proposed layout, on the other hand, pulls the queue up against the residential property line, puts 2 menu boards instead of the existing 1 board about 15 feet away from the same property line, which is now 35 feet away, and reduces available parking to 12 spaces. And the hours of operation for the drive-through are apparently 24/7, which, if you can hear that, that's kind of amazing. The landscaping plan actually shows, the proposed landscaping plan actually shows no room for landscaping at all along the residential property line, except at that inside corner radius. So more of the landscaping is actually up against the McDonald's than protecting adjacent uses. Photo number 5 of the interior lot series, so that's the photographs that are taken in the interior lot and look out to the adjoining properties, shows actually just how close the rear windows of the adjacent properties are to the active parking and queuing areas. Those people are looking right into all the action, the delivery of the food, everything. And then they say that they have 18-wheelers delivering at 6 a.m. I couldn't tell from the proposal how the 18-wheelers approach, turn, where do they go? Is this imposing all of this on those neighbors? In addition, the light spread diagram shows high levels spreading onto the adjacent properties. Those levels have to be 0 at the property line. I note also that almost all of the other commercial buildings along East Tremont, including the existing McDonald's, have a better relationship to the street line, street wall than the proposed. So this is pulling the building back. It's a very kind of suburban approach to a McDonald's, to a commercial building where you surround it with a parking lot, as opposed to what you see on East Tremont, where most of the commercial buildings are up against the property line, and then the parking is either adjacent or behind.
But that's not, I mean, most fast food in the boroughs is constructed exactly like this, pulled off of the street line.
Doesn't make it good urbanism, just makes it fast food, right? So, but my bigger concern is about the pulling all of the traffic, and they tell us about a very high clientele base, right? All up against that residential property without any buffering, other than a fence, and the fence is only 6 feet high. When you look at that photograph number 5, those bedrooms, I'm assuming, don't have anything to protect them sound-wise, fumes-wise, anything-wise. Also, there's these trash enclosures that are shown where if the doors are open, you need to move the parked cars. So I actually don't understand how the trash enclosures work. Elevations showing signs and the signage areas need to demonstrate that all the signage complies with the zoning resolution. They describe the lower level as a basement, but I actually think it's a cellar because it's it's a at-grade selling floor. And they need to provide information on the menu board sound limiter levels and demonstrate that it will not be perceptible by the time sound reaches the property line. They said that actually sound is reaching the property line at 54 dBA, and that's not allowed. And the traffic study also states that at peak hours, 72 to 75% of the vehicle trips use the drive-through. But the study also says, and this is my confusion, I don't understand that part, says that pedestrians accounted for 85% of the trips during peak hours. So it seems like there's a conflict in the statistics, or I'm not understanding the distinction.
I think they're talking about for people who arrive by car, 72% use the drive-through, 30% park.
No, actually,
And-
they said that of the pedestrians, many of them came from the parking lot. So I'm like, how do we, so they were counting pedestrians by having someone stand at the door with a clicker, and there was nobody standing at the parking lot flagging the guy with the clicker not to count that person, because we already counted him in the vehicle trips. So they need to clarify that. Okay. And then, just to remind everybody, this special permit has a maximum term of 5 years. Any other?
Yeah.
Yes.
First, regarding the statement of findings, statement of finding refers to 11 reservoir spaces, whereas the plan shows 10, so something needs to be corrected. I'm assuming the plan.
No, the other way around.
You
The plan-
counted 9.
No,
Oh, sorry.
they showed 10 vehicles. There is space for an 11th one, but it's not very clear, so I just.
Maybe it's not allowed to count as a reservoir, is it?
I don't know, but then
I
the
think the
document has to
minimum
be.
is 10, and so they're showing they comply with the minimum required.
But then they're proposing 11, and all throughout the statement, it refers to 11, and if we are going to approve the plan, I think the plan then needs to reflect 11.
Sure, it has to reflect what is.
Right.
Whatever what is.
With regards to I actually looked at the plan and reviewed it from a different point of view in terms of the curb cut that is there currently. It's a very wide curb cut on East Tremont. It's a 45-foot wide curb cut. And it is one of the major thoroughfares. There are buses and other, there is pedestrian flow. What I liked about this solution was that it actually reduces the amount of curb cut and breaks it up into 2 smaller curb cuts, so which gives a little bit more space for the pedestrian to navigate the traffic circulation that's being generated from this operation. And another thing that was brought to our attention was the letter that the council member, Janaji? Jonai had sent. And he indicated that this proposal was based on several meetings that the McDonald's representatives and the community board and the residents had, where they factored in the current issue that this neighborhood faces, which is a lot of vehicles backing up on Phillip Street.
Right.
Because that there's a conflict between the cars that are going into the to the drive-through and the cars that are going into the parking lot. And that causes a significant backup into the Phillips. And this actually addresses that separation of the two, where the vehicles that are coming into the parking lot are coming from, they are coming from Phillips, but it doesn't have to, it's away from the drive-through lane or from Tremont. And the drive-through has now a lot bigger reservoir space, which also ensures that there isn't a spilling happening on Phillips.
So I'm confused about that because the existing condition is very generous. It has a lane for cars to come park, and it has a lane for cars to go to the drive-through, parallel to each other. That's why the building that's why everything is so far away from and it has a lane for people to park, actually. So that's why the sources of noise are so far away from the resident, because it's got these 3 lanes going, one for parking, one for pass-by, and one for ordering. So I don't actually understand why that's a source of
I
more
think the fact
congestion.
that it's, sorry, go ahead. You've probably been to the site.
I have been to the site.
Yeah.
This, and it's not that far from where I used to live, actually. This site draws a lot of drive-through traffic, and it's backing up onto the side streets. And that's what the problem is. The reservoir is too short. It's about 6 or 7 cars. And even when I went, and I was here Friday even to take another look at it, I was like, look, I'm not even going on here. Because the last car was off of the site trying to get onto the site. It's socked full of people who drive. This neighborhood is further away from the subway. It does have bus lines, but the people here drive. This is a driving neighborhood.
So the issue is that the reservoir is too short there.
Right.
But I guess my question is why, for instance, so the reservoir is too short because they're building up around where the building is located now. But if you were to slide the building down and still allow for, but keep it as far away as it is currently from the property line, why couldn't you just slide the building down in its same basic shape? They don't even need as much floor area anymore, but in its same basic shape, and hold to the property line, but have people pass further away. Like you've got those 3 lanes. There's parking, there's the pass by, and there's the drive-through. Why can't you keep that?
But it's not the building. It's the parking lot. The building, when they're sliding, if you go down to where the building is, there is width between the edge of the building and the end of the lot. It's the parking lot that's cutting into where the drive lane is now. It's that,
The
and I don't
existing
know
building,
why.
you're saying?
No, if you
this
slide the
size
building
of the
down.
site.
Which building are we talking about? The existing building?
The existing building is,
Okay.
I mean, it's now in a different kind of shape, but if you look down here, the new proposed
The
building,
corner of the site.
where the building is, there is some distance that's like 30 feet.
But that's only the building itself. What I mean is the active driving, therefore the
Right,
queuing,
yes, the
right,
active queuing though
is right up against the property.
Right, because it's
As
gotta,
proposed.
right, because it's pushed there because of the new parking lot, and the direction of the parking
But-
lot is
but-
shoving it over.
But, so my question is, why does it have to be like that? Why can't you go back to the existing drawing?
No, I know. This one is proposed.
So the existing,
This is existing, sorry.
where the building is now up against the corner, right? East Tremont and whatever that is. So if you were to take that building, the same configuration, and instead of rotating it like they did, just slide it down towards towards the end of the property, then you would have that same 30-foot, or it's even more, 30-foot something distance between the property line and the building, and you could have the queuing be as long as you want, right? And it would still slide around the back of the building in the same way that it's doing there.
The question is then, how will you configure the parking?
One of the reasons I think that it's forcing up against the residential property is because they've decided to do what they consider to be like an architectural moment, which we all learned in architecture school on the third day. We rotate. So they rotated the parking lot because that looks like you designed something. And if they don't rotate the parking lot and they don't rotate the building, they keep it orthogonal to the shape of the lot, you might be able to get the same amount of parking and still keep the entire and configure the building squatter or literally flip the building so it's perpendicular to what it is right now. Apparently this is a smaller building than the one they had before. So with that smaller building, configuring it slightly differently so that you're more,
Right, but the other thing that they were trying to do is also increase the amount of landscaping. So it's the very first building has virtually no landscaping, but the proposed building has a lot. I mean, they're making, like you said, an artful statement in increasing the landscaping and kind of setting the parking lot diagonal, but look at all of the landscaping. I don't know if that's a result of the community conversation.
This was also the requirement of the amount of landscaping that needs to be provided, because of which I think in the statement, they were saying that they had to do it somewhat in an angle to allow for whatever minimum amount of landscaping that had to be provided along that frontage. And the angle of this is kind of flows with a car that's coming in. It's going to, instead of having to make a very sharp left turn to park into the parking lot, if this parking lot was perpendicular to this angle, it actually flows right in, which further reduces the conflict of a vehicle trying to make that sharp turn. This actually flows more right into the flow of the traffic and then merge out. So I think that's one of, and the reason I understand you're saying moving the building back, this is the furthest point the building can be moved back to allow for that 10 reservoir spaces.
Yeah,
Because-
but I understand that, but the building is configured in a certain way. A lot of the landscaping is being done, some of it is being done to comply with zoning regulations about parking lots. Most of it, though, frankly, is being done because it's the leftover space from a not very efficient layout. So, but if, like I always say, if I were your client and I'm telling you that I need you to give me a 4-foot buffer of planting between the property line and your first drive, what would you do, right? So, because my concern is that the residential tenants, and it's not just one neighbor, all of those little houses are looking at this place. And so, and now they're all affected by 2 menu boards that are much closer to them than before, and by the queuing that is going on 24 hours a day. And I think to ignore them and to just look at McDonald's interest, which is to do exactly what they do on all of their lots, is missing an opportunity. I think you could accomplish both by a little bit of tweaking of this, and then you would be able to pull away, because all they're doing now is a 6-foot fence, and I don't think that's respectful to the neighbors. And I always look at it from that perspective, because these are not urban solutions, these kinds of drive-in things. So, urbanism's sort of out the window. But there are neighbors who live in an urban context who are up against these residential uses, and not to forget that, this requires a special permit for a reason, right? Because you have to be concerned with the impact on the residents. So anyway, I just think they should be looking at it, and I do think that there's a solution where it accomplishes both things.
I had a couple of comments in addition to that. One was the statement refers to bike parking. It's not shown in the plan. Now, I also realized that the relocating the curb cut on the East Tremont site will result in relocating some of the street structures, like the meter parking, the phone booth, and I'm assuming those would require approval from DOB? This is just a question I have. DOT, I mean, right?
Yeah, DOT.
Okay. And my other suggestion was maybe also provide some street tree along Tremont. Now that the curb cut has been moved away, there is some space. And
Is that an issue for visibility for ingress and egress from the parking lot?
Could be.
could be.
Because this is a
Actually,
really
that's a good point.
heavily
Yeah, could be.
trafficked,
Yeah, could be.
in general, not
Okay.
just access to this parking lot, but for turning on to Tremont from, yeah.
And I had similar question with regards to the truck parking. Where will that occur? And how would the truck access the site?
Right, okay. Anybody else?
I agree with you on the issue that putting this drive-through very close to that adjacent building is, I believe it's a problematic. I tend to like the existing conditions, circulation, much better than the proposed. I believe if they try to redesign the circulation for the proposed conditions, that could be helpful. For example, at glance, I could think of, like, if we make the entrance from East Termon and then go around the building and continue to the currently proposed drive-through, and then exit again from East Termon, that would be much helpful.
So a loop.
Yes, like a U shape, yes.
Where would
And-
the
and-
parking be?
Well, you could get off the loop into the parking,
Yeah,
right? So you might have a parallel thing like they currently do, right? Currently, you have a parallel. One enters onto the queue and one enters onto the route that's going to go to the parking. So it'd be the same. You just sort of jump off that same curb cut entrance.
and then make the curb cut from Phillips for just exit only. So whoever is done with the drive-through, he can probably, I'm sorry, not drive-through, parking, he could just pull over and just jump on Phillips and continue
I think
driving.
that's exactly
crossing the
what the
loop.
community does not want. They do
And
not,
then he'll be crossing the drive-through
Yeah.
loop. If you're talking about putting a loop here, and then there's parking in here and parking here, you gotta cross the drive-through loop to get out.
No, I'm thinking about the drive-through
No,
could
he's
be,
separating it.
could be something like that. They could enter from here, not exit from here. and
Enter
then
from
go
Tremont.
Around it like that.
So
Then
you're in and out.
Out. And then make a separate lane here for N, park.
Yes.
And then when you're
So
done.
parking is
just-
distinct, entirely distinct from the.
Yes,
So, some of it is how tight of a turn, of course,
That's a
you can
tight
make.
turn.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, but it's not for us to know everything about how to design their project that we're doing in the air kind of thing. But in other words, there are concerns that should be addressed, right?
The other
So-
issue with that, though, is if you're falling out of your reservoir, you're on East Tremont, and you can't do that. That's a no-no. So to have a reservoir coming off of East Tremont like that, where you may have overspill onto East, you can't do that. That's a
Right.
major thoroughfare. So I know the community does not want that. That's going to hold everybody up, and you've got a lot of pedestrians on Tremont as well. So I don't think anyone wants the drive-through to begin on Tremont.
They can address it.
Yeah, right. So we can't design it for them. We can just raise our concerns, and they address them. Okay. Uh-huh.
Item number 3, 2017-214 BZ, 1459 East 24th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, we approve of service of initial application to officials, but again, I didn't find the notice of hearing to officials. Whose is this one? This is Henry's. So I didn't find it, officials and neighbors, so we need that. Community Board 14 recommended approval. We have 2 letters in support. The building isn't in a flood zone. With respect to retention of existing building material, the architect should provide a demolition plan that will give them, which demonstrates what it says in the written description that's provided in the architect's letter and in the statement of facts, and also measures the existing linear feet of perimeter walls and floor joists to be retained, because a written description of how you're going to demolish something is quite strange. You do that with drawings. The statement of facts states existing perimeter wall height and total heights are lower than what is shown on the plans, so that needs to be clarified or coordinated. Statement of fact states that the existing front yard is non-complying at 17 feet, but I don't think that's correct. I think it's a complying front yard. And then there's this proposed wraparound porch that wraps into the side yard. It goes from the front and wraps to the side yard, and unless that's an existing non-complying condition, I don't think that's permitted. Porches are not permitted obstructions in open space under section 23-12. Even balconies are not permitted obstructions. So those are an upper level where you can pass under them in side yards. But porches are permitted. So there's actually a conflict. So 23-12, which has to do with open space, and 23-131, which is permitted obstructions in yards, are in conflict with each other. The open space provision doesn't allow porches, and the permitted obstructions in side yards does allow porches in side yards, or in yards anyway. But under the rules of construction, the more restrictive governs, I don't see that side porch is a permitted obstruction. So I think they should actually take that out, and if they want to negotiate with DOB and make an argument, that's another thing. But it doesn't look like the zoning resolution allows it, unless it's a pre-existing condition, in which case they can claim, and if they can prove it, they can claim an existing non-compliant
Did they
condition.
put some delineation on the plan to annul
If
or
it's
anything?
not allowed, then that implies that we're okay with it if DOB is okay with it, right? But in that case, I just don't think it's allowed.
Right.
So, that would be allowing the front yard to be non-compliant, and we don't govern front yards.
Under the
Right.
special permit.
Yeah, so, there's a section that shows the third floor penetrating the sky exposure plane. That may be dormers, but again, the sections are always so strange where they're taken from. I would like them to show another section, a short section that's not taken through the dormers, so we can really understand what the roof line is. And then they need to demonstrate compliance with section 632-B, 23-632-B for rear and side yard setbacks that are above 30 feet high. I'm not sure that it complies. And then with respect to the rear yard incursion at the third floor, that room is very deep and could be pulled back significantly so as to impose less on the rear yard, so they should do that. Lot 26 next door received a special permit that allowed a second-story extension to 20 feet in the rear yard, and I just note that that's BSA changing the character of the neighborhood right there. It isn't clear from the provided materials whether the other nearby houses on the block have one-story or two-story rear yard incursions, but there are several other lots on the block that receive special permits, so the data needs to show whether that's a two-story or a one-story incursion. With respect to the requested FAR, it's high for the social block, but it's not unseen. According to the data, there are 2 houses on the social block and 2 on the tax block in that range. With respect to the second floor front addition, the typical front enclosed porch with setback at the second floor that was so typical of the block has changed over time. And on the social block, there are a few examples of flush wall treatments at both levels. The height, however, is greater than the neighbors. It's even significantly greater than the adjacent recipient of a special permit. So I don't see how that's justified. The applicant should clarify in drawings about the varying heights of the roof line, because it's really not clear at all what the heights are. They're not dimensioned. And the height can be brought down to be more in line with the neighbors, because it's a very tall house.
I had similar comments with regards to the height. My recommendation, and I think it is very much possible, to set the attic floor away from the front facade. The dormer doesn't, and the dormer is adding to that appearance of the height in the front, and that can also reduce the height of the building and reducing the total height from 35 feet, as you indicated, the abutting buildings.
Okay. Any other comment?
Yeah, regarding the sequence of construction, I saw a sequence of construction letter submitted from the architect, and it was included also in the statement of facts. I would like to put it in the record that we look at this for illustration only. It's not going to be reviewed by us, and they might need to submit it to the DOB for review.
Right. So we're going to be asking for a demolition drawing, so it's clear where there's instructions to basically to the contractor, what's removed, what's retained. And so whatever's in that write-up needs to appear on drawings. And we've had some, well, I think over the history of this special permit, but right now we're getting communications from some members of one of the communities that pays a lot of attention to these projects under the 622 special permit, where they're observing what they say is a total demolition of a building, which would void the special permit, and DOB goes to a site and is not aware of the criteria for the special permit and doesn't issue a violation. So we have a disconnect here, which I know we've had a lot with these special permits, and we need to be extra careful. Otherwise, it's just a complete abuse of this very strange special permit in the first place, but it's a complete abuse of it.
Yeah, it's good to make it like a standard for these kind of special permits, that they make a submission for the demo plans, and these plans go to the DOB as part of their submission to the DOB. So number one, they become aware of the conditions of the special permit, and number two, if they're gonna include any construction sequence, we don't want to take these. Sometimes these construction sequence work as structural communication between the engineer / the architect and the contractor. I just wanted to make it clear that we're not reviewing this. This should be reviewed by the DOB.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Item number 4, 2017-216 BZ, 411 Wales Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay. So we have proof of notice of hearings to officials and neighbors. I didn't actually find proof of service of the initial application. Can somebody make sure? Say what? Okay, we need to always have that before the hearing. I shouldn't be finding these now. Hold on a second. Community, but on the other hand, we have community board recommendations, so they must have received it. Community board recommends approval, and we have 3 letters in support. With respect to the 73, section 7319 special permit threshold, we actually need an affirmative statement with backup that this is a ZR 1210 school as defined in the zoning resolution. The statement of facts doesn't address the question and needs to provide supporting materials for that. They need to show clearly on the land use map that the subject site is within 400 feet of an R district, because they're just showing 200 feet to the edge of the site for the gym, and they have to show that the site is fully within 400 feet of an R district, which it is, but they need to show that. I'd like to understand the catchment area for the school, and upon what that catchment area is based, like how they decide that this needed to be in Community School District 7. And were the other sites that were considered in the same catchment area, there wasn't a map that was provided, so then it would mean us looking all around at those sites, so they should have provided a map to show that they were in the immediate area. Drawing P1 doesn't show the lot area of the zoning lot and should calculate allowable floor areas with the lots merged into a single zoning lot. I understand that they didn't yet merge the zoning lot, but they are assuming that it's one zoning lot. And for our purposes, it is one zoning lot because they will eventually file merger documents, right? And they will own both of these lots if they don't already. So the merger doesn't require consent of another party or anything like that. I note with concern that this site is in the Port Morris Industrial Business Zone. And usually the council member is involved in these kinds of questions because that's the whole point of an IBZ, that you don't dilute it with uses that are not industrial. So I would like to hear them address this. I'd like to know whether the community board was aware of this. I know it says it in the statement of facts, but the community board may not have picked up on that. They explain they say in footnote 3 in the statement of facts that the second floor will be used initially as an incubator school until full enrollment by the subject school is achieved, which I understand, but I'd like to understand what do they mean by an incubator school? How does that work? How do they find one? Is it?
What is the impact on the findings? Like
Right.
what children are going to be in it? Do they have busing?
I think in terms of busing, they're looking at their own school in the full build-out,
High school versus-
right? So it's at the projected 10 years from now story. Then they describe in the statement of facts that they have a unique approach to school design. I didn't see anything unique about the school design, so either take the sentence out or explain to us what's so unique about your school design approach. They may have a unique approach to pedagogy, but I didn't see it revealed in the design of the school. I didn't see elevator access to the second floor for ADA. There is an elevator, but it's 230 feet away as the crow flies from the front door. And you either have to go through the kitchen to get there or walk, in the end, not as a crow, but as a person, 260 feet. So that's another example of a person who's disabled, who is least able to walk the longest distance, walking the longest distance, or wheeling the longest distance. Fire department needs to review the fire safety issues on this building. I didn't see notes on the plans that the building will be fully sprinklered and a fire alarm installed, which obviously it must be. With respect to school bus pickup and drop-off, I'd like to understand how this is affecting parking in the area and the area businesses. We actually had one case where a neighbor who operated, was an automotive facility?
Across the street,
Yeah,
right.
across the street, was panicked about what was going to be happening to his business as a result of buses, so that needs to be coordinated and explained to us. They should show the train and bus stop locations on the land use map. Clarify that the buses are, they need to clarify whether the buses are pick up and drop off only and don't park there, because I understood it's part of what the Board of Ed provides. So that sounds to me like they just drop the kids off and then they come back later and they go away to where they go. And I'm curious again, because of the businesses in this area, whether the no standing area can be just limited to those pickup and drop off times. So, because we've had with some of the private schools, them saying, no, but we have so many after-school activities and mid-school activities and all that, that it's silly for us to have the no standing zone only in the mornings and in the afternoons. But in this case, it doesn't sound like that's the case. And then that would open up more parking for the businesses. With respect to the drop-offs by private car and taxi, the school actually should have data on this based on their other school, as opposed to, I don't know, using standard guesstimates. So, and then one last couple of other things. With respect to pedestrian safety, the tech memo that concluded that better controls at intersections need to be implemented, so that should become part of our conditions. They talked about needing, what do you call it, like better markings, actual stop signs, things like that, which apparently they
Yeah,
don't have
DOT
right
is
now.
reviewing the latest submission on that.
So that, but to make a note that whatever the terms are, that needs to be implemented. And then maybe, Tracy, do you want to go over the status on, I have notes on it, but if you wanted to go over.
Sure. They're requesting an E-designation for hazmat because they will need to do remediation.
Is your microphone on?
Yeah, it's
Okay, sorry.
They will need to do remediation, but they're concerned about timing and funding, getting the RAP and CHASP approved in time. And they have an open DEP review, so I asked DEP if they could look at the E-designation as well, and I haven't heard back. For air quality, they're requesting an E-designation for restricted windows and air takes in certain parts of the building due to the Chick Chop Woodworking Shop, which is on 144th Street. It's across the street. DEP is going to take a look at that.
And there's an SSDS and vapor barrier.
Based on the phase 2, they will be requiring at least an SSDS, vapor barrier, indoor sampling after the remediation. It's going to be a lot of remediation.
That kind of information needs to be on the plans because air quality. So because the vapor barrier and SSDS are obviously part of the construction documents, so are the closed window conditions, so all of that needs to be
I don't think
shown.
they finalized the
Yeah.
remediation yet, so
Right.
if they get an E-designation, I think that might be determined by OER what is required, but if they don't, then they'd have to get the DEP.
But from our perspective, because once out the door, we can't say whatever OER says because that's what always falls through the cracks. So at the very least, we could have, if OER ultimately says no SSDS is required, then they'd have a letter from OER to us saying, we know it was required, but OER said no, it doesn't need it anymore. But they should show it on the drawings once the review is more complete, because otherwise DOB won't know to expect it. And, it's hard enough for us to coordinate our approved sets with what DOB ultimately approved. And then there was also
And then
noise.
We got a noise sign off in the DO.
We got a noise sign off, but doesn't it require that there be a step down up by 28 dBA? Because the ambient levels are in the 70s outside. So the drawings again need to show wall assembly and window assembly attenuation levels that bring it down to 45 dBA. And so they make a statement that they'll do that, but we should actually understand how they're going to do that. So in other words, product information on the STC ratings for the windows and details on the wall assemblies that do that, make that step down. Because they actually claim that by the time we add the insulation and this, we'll be at much greater than a 28 dBA step down. But show us how. And then DOT school safety requested removal of curb cuts. That needs to be indicated on the plans, because right now we see curb cuts on the plans. And
Yeah, the applicant said they submitted a commitment letter to remove the curb cut,
okay,
but the DOT review is still ongoing.
okay. Right, others?
I upon realizing that this was in the IBC, I'd reached out to city planning.
Just speak up, I don't know that the mic is.
Upon realizing that this was in an IBZ, I'd reached out to city planning, Bronx Planning Office, just to see if they were aware of it and if they had heard any issues. They had heard about it. I don't think they have any issues, but they also identified that there has been some recent changes in the land use. There was a recent rezoning 2 blocks away of manufacturing land to residential, so there is.
In the IBZ? That's not allowed, right?
The rezoning happened. It has happened very recently, and it is to allow mixed-use residential.
But it's not in the IBZ.
Actually, I have to go back and check, but it is very close to the IBC
permitted.
area. But, it probably, my point is that they're saying that the uses in the IBZ is changing. And there are some schools in the immediate area that has been there. So I'm not saying anything to the effect that that was an IBZ area, but the uses in the area are changing from manufacturing to non-manufacturing. So that's, and if they had heard any other issues concerning the school, they had said, okay, they hadn't. So,
But if there are schools in the area, but they're outside of the IBZ is supposed to be this protected zone, and when we've had variances requesting a different kind of a use in an IBZ, it's because, when we consider them, it's because they're right on the edge, right? They're literally opposite the residence district. So where you're not making much of a whittle, and then of course the variance is a whole other subject where you have somebody who's deprived of property rights, is the concept anyway. Right? So this is different.
So as to unloading and loading, they've chosen Wales Avenue, and the main entrance is on the side street. And there is an entrance on Wales Avenue, but in the first set of plans that we looked at, that actually was the middle school's entrance, and now it's just saying entrance number 2. So I was just wondering if they could talk about the management of the arrival and departure, and why they chose Wales Avenue versus the side street, which is, I think, 144th. And then the other question as to that incubator school, right now they're saying 9 buses will be used to transport 310 K to 5th graders. When they go up to 8th grade, they're only adding 1 more grade of bus riders. So there might be an impact of the incubator school depending on the age of the children. If they're bus riders, there will be significantly more buses. So if they're from K to 6, they're entitled to city bus transportation on a school bus. So that might make a difference. So they really should discuss it if they already have an idea of who's going to take over that second floor.
Others?
Hold on. Item number 5, 2017-217BZ, 4855 Highland Boulevard, Staten Island.
Okay. So, give proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board 3 recommends denial with 1 opposed to denial, so 1 in favor of the application, and lists the following objections. That the application is in defiance of the 2011 Lower Density Growth Management Area Text Amendment that is intended to reduce the size and number of medical facilities in residence districts and the absence of adequate parking for them, and that the proposal has inadequate parking for patients and staff. They were concerned about the characterization of the neighborhood as a mix of commercial and residential as being inaccurate, as there is no commercial and there are no soft sites that would allow such development, that the proposal is incompatible with neighborhood character, that the patients targeted by the proposal are limited, so not representative of the community's needs, and in any event, the medical practice could change over time from what is described as a fertility clinic by the applicant. Councilmember Borelli, on the other hand, sent a letter in support stating that the existing fertility clinic is too small to accommodate its need for laboratories, operating and recovery rooms, forcing patients to travel to Brooklyn for treatment. We have 6 other letters of objection citing parking and traffic problems, residential character of the neighborhood, and a plethora of other medical facilities in the area. One letter stated that his own application to develop a medical facility was denied, but that was in 2008, and I noted that was an application for a variance for yard waivers. There wasn't a special permit for the use, withdrawn in 2008. A firm map was provided, but the site location isn't indicated, though only 1 block from the water, the site doesn't appear to be in a flood zone. There are open ECB violations that should be removed from BIS, since they all appear to be dated, and there is now a C of O. Some of them are about not having a C of O. The BSA zoning calculation sheet appears to have been incorrectly completed, as it shows floor area and FAR complying, which it is not. With respect to the so-called legal as-built non-complying conditions, I'd like to understand what the setback requirements when the building was built in 1990 were, and what the parking requirements for that use in 1990 were, and does the existing building comply with those? They submitted as-built plans, which I thought were very difficult to read, so I couldn't actually verify anything. In 1990, I don't even know whether the cellar space was included in parking calculations for this use. I don't think it was. It wasn't called ambulatory, it used to be called medical facilities, right? The peak use anticipates 10 patients. So then I don't understand what the need for 14 exam rooms are as described in the statement of facts, but actually, when I do a count, I find 15 exam rooms, 17 offices, 5 ORs, 1 recovery, 1 lab, yeah, I think that's it. So that's a lot of doctors, a lot of patients at the same time, way more than what peak is described as. And Councilmember Borelli said that, and I assume that's because he met with the fertility clinic operator, he said the clinic is too small to accommodate its need for laboratories, operating, and recovery rooms. Meanwhile, there's only 1 small lab, what did I say, 1 recovery room, and 5 ORs. So I can understand the need for enlargement for ORs, but I don't understand why you need that many offices. And by the way, a lot of doctors use offices as exam rooms. They double function. So I'd like to understand how many doctors are in this practice at one time. And also, the new exam rooms are much larger than the existing exam rooms, and they're only partially dimensioned, so I can't really figure out what they are. I'd like to understand the need for such large rooms. My impression is actually, like we've seen on another application, that they just drew this box and then fill it in with spaces that they label, and this isn't related to actual need. It's just they have a box and they want to build out the site. And then no parking study was done in the EAS because the required parking is being provided for the enlargement, so we're not taking into account what the parking impact will be. But I note that in terms of sizes of exam rooms, the standard practice, because I used to be a medical designer, the standard practice was an 8 by 10 exam room. That was what everyone did, and then they started to get a little bit larger. So according to very recent sources, by a company that actually provides the exam tables, the ideal room sizes are 10 by 10, 10 by 12, or 12 by 12. All of these new exam rooms are significantly larger than that. They're 15 by something. So I don't think that's sort of the reasonable minimum. Also, so in terms of the findings, I'd like to know how the proposed scale and massing of the building meet the findings of relating harmoniously to the surrounding buildings, and how the proposed open space is compatible with the neighborhood. You cannot rely on the presence of parks in the area to satisfy the finding. The finding relates to the proposed project and how the building sits on the site. there's a statement of facts that there's plenty of parks, so you don't really need to worry about open space. Well, actually, the open space has to be on the site. And most of the space on the site is a parking lot. So how does that comply with permitted obstructions in open space that say you can only have 50% of parking lot? Also, I don't really understand, there's an existing cellar, so why isn't the parking proposed at the cellar level? They should show the level of grade on the sections, which we don't see. And they should show that the open parking area complies with section 37-90. And the statement of facts refers to a proposed brick exterior, so making it sound lovely, but actually the drawing shows scored stucco, which is a very cheap way to go, but it's better than Ephes. So how does the proposed building exterior conform to neighboring residential buildings? And any other comments?
In terms of the open spaces that they're providing a similar buffer and actually improving the buffer that they don't have at all along Barclay. They're providing more buffer along Barclay. Currently, there isn't any. And they're providing some more buffer between the residential building behind them, which they don't have any proposal. If there's going to be any massing on this, I think having it closer to Highland is better than having the building set back towards the residential. This is not questioning how much exam rooms or anything. I'm just talking in terms of the placement of the massing and how it is furthest away from the residential approachway. And trying to maximize the space by providing the parking in the cellar, which is actually depressed because the cellars, this site is at a lower elevation than the residential buildings above. So that also actually brings the height of the building down somewhat, and the parking is at that level. So, and having this berm in the front kind of also gives a little bit more protection and takes away from the visual cue along Highland.
But the massing is going towards the residential, right?
No,
'Cause
the
it's a
massing is
second-
along Highland.
Along Highland, yeah.
The residential is here, so the massing is more along Highland.
Well, it's filling up the site, actually. So you've got an existing one-story, and then they're adding a second story to it. The second floor is pulled back because you have side yard regulations that they didn't comply with. And then that building that's perpendicular to the existing building is as close to the rear property line as it can be and still comply with yard regulations.
They're not making any changes to the existing one, right?
Yeah, the existing building gets a second story, but the second story is pulled back because it needs to comply with yard regulations.
Right.
So, but it's still getting a second story, so it's not that the massing isn't happening on the other corner. It's just that the orientation of the building
Is
long, but that's because the site is long, right? So.
Yeah, so the massing is more along Highland and less along the residential. And because this building site is depressed, the height of the building is lower than the buildings above because they're at a higher elevation. The ground kind of slopes down towards Highland.
Does it show that in the sections?
It doesn't, but when I was doing the Google Street View thing, that's kind of how and when I was looking at the elevations, the elevation of the building above, next to it was at a higher elevation than this particular building's parking, if you especially look at Barclay and I think it's the Allen Street.
So they need to show that in section, because I actually couldn't tell that from the drawings, that there's a difference in apparent height between this site and the adjoining properties. So. Okay. But those are just photographs. So in sections to show us. Okay. Because it looks pretty flat.
Yeah, there's especially this. There is like a few foot of difference. That's what I gathered from the Google view.
Can they show the percentage of the lot that's actually landscaped and compare that to the percentage of lots that are the percentage of the lots that are surrounding that are landscaped? So that we could see that they at least are providing an equivalent amount of landscaping on the site. And then it's hard to tell how tall the, I guess the evergreens on the border with the residential is on the interior lot lines. And the question is, could they be 6 feet?
Sure they can. Just plant them. Plant ones that are or will be 6 feet.
Oh, I'm a little concerned with the community impact on this project. Right now, they're saying that there are going to be about 15 employees at any given time. But as you stated earlier, Chair, the amount of offices that are already there would probably seem like there'd be more than 15 people there at any given time, which, if they're expecting to have more patients come in, I'm really wondering where these people are going to park, and if this neighborhood is actually able to have that kind of input of more vehicles and more people. It doesn't seem like there's much commercial around there right now. I'd like to go visit the site before I say anything more about that,
Right.
but really think there's something about how this affects the community that we should probably dive into a bit.
Commissioner Shetta, did you have a question?
No, I have no additional comments.
And also the landscape plan,
Say again?
sorry, the landscape plan that they submitted, that's a separate document from the proposed plans, and that was submitted sort of after we sort of requiring more detailed landscaping. So that was submitted after the proposed plans, and that I don't think fully correlates with what's in the proposed plans. So they should make
Oh, so
the
coordinate.
landscape plan match what the proposed plans have as landscaping. That was sort of done as, an after.
Okay.
Good. Okay, yeah. This concludes the public review session for March 19, 2018.